All right, we are about to get started. We will start at exactly 9:30. But first, I'm going to introduce Charissa Sedor and pass it over to you in about 6 seconds.
That's me. Hello, I am Charissa Sedor. I am the theater technician at the Adler Planetarium, and I'm here to talk to you about Unreal Engine. Other Worlds is a new exhibit gallery at the Adler Planetarium. We just opened it this summer. It is a very fun exhibit. Totally come see it if you can. There's a lot of different exhibits about the types of planets we find in our solar system. It's all about the variety of things that are out there that we know of and that we don't know of. A lot of things to interact with. This giant spinning globe is very fun. We have an LED floor that you can walk on. A giant climbable planet, that's great. We see lots of family selfies there. It's very cute. And some restored Adler exhibits as well, which look great. But another part of it is the part that I worked on. The experience is called Walk on Other Worlds. And the idea is that you will walk into an enclosed gallery and you will see content projected on two curved screens, one in front and one behind, and to feel immersed like you're walking on another planet. And it's about a 7.5-minute looping video. There's 3 different worlds, and everything was built in Unreal Engine. So if you're not familiar with Unreal Engine, it is a game engine. You may have heard of Unity as well. It is the game engine that built Fortnite, so you're probably familiar with Fortnite. And it handles things like graphics, physics, sounds, game AI, your NPCs, anything that reacts to a user, and user input. So it handles all of that for you so you can focus on other things. And it's a full, basically, production studio. You can use it to make videos as well. It is used for cinematography. Really cool, I learned this year they used it for the new Game of Thrones show as a real-time kind of LED back display to put the actors in the world, which is very cool. So, 3 different worlds. The first one is Mars, and this is showing you the front and back view side by side. So, for this world, we wanted to feature perseverance and ingenuity, of course. And because it's a real world, we wanted to use as much real data as we could. So the backdrop is actually a panoramic image taken from the surface of Mars. And, of course, the models we got from NASA. So we have Perseverance doing its little drilling, and we have Ingenuity flying. And there is sound, but it's very quiet right now. But the sound was part of it as well. Had to put that all together. Some particle effects as Ingenuity lands there. So yeah, we wanted to make sure we used as much real stuff as we could. We wanted to have one real world because the other 2 were going to be completely made up fictional planets. I did animate them in Blender. Blender and Unreal can work together. You can move things around between them. I was a little bit more familiar with Blender, so I chose to animate them there. You can also animate in Unreal. The sky's the limit. So our second world is an ice world, and this one is a fully created fictional planet. And we wanted to have a planet that was, maybe had a frozen lake of some liquid underneath it, maybe some bioluminescent life forms that we can see under the ice, so you might see those floating around, maybe a cryovolcano, so we have one in the distance, and maybe some pressure that causes some geysers as well. So this world was very fun to make using a lot of particle effects. Really, particle effects were a big part of all of it to give it a lot of motion and kind of make it feel more real. Unreal has a lot of controls with particle effects. So yeah, our ice world, we sculpted that landscape. So there's a landscape sculpting tool in Unreal. You can build your own mountains and whatever you want it to look like. You can make it look rougher, you can make it look smoother. It's very fun to play with. It is just like having a little trowel and playing with some clay and sculpting a world. We also, for this world, used a lot of assets that we found on the Quixel Megascans library, which is a library of things that are, they're based on real-life scans of real objects. So they're extremely highly detailed, and they're all available for use. And like I said, a lot of particle effects, the fog, the bioluminescent life, the geysers that we see, all sorts of different controls you have there as well. And also, we got to use a little camera work on this one because it was a 3D world. So we got to move the camera through space. And we put two, I have them facing each other, they're kissing. But have them kind of riding a rail just slowly through. And it gives you a nice visual. You can see it looks exactly like a studio would. And you can visualize where everything is going to be. A lot of controls over cameras as well. So you can control the lens type, you can control the aperture, you can control all sorts of things, just like you could with a real camera. The last world is my favorite. This is the water world. This one was very, very fun to make. I got to put a lot of detail into it. So we wanted a world that didn't look like Earth, but was still, you know, watery, had some kind of foliage on it. We were thinking maybe this is around a red dwarf star. So what would plant life look there? So we made sure to, you know, have some red foliage. It's cold, it's wet, so we have some fungi as well. This world, by the way, came to be because I found these really cool mushrooms and I wanted to use them. So, like, it's a mushroom planet now. But also, there's some fictional planets in the sky. Again, wanted to make sure, like, you are not on Earth right now. You're somewhere else. So I felt like those would give it a cool, otherworldly vibe. So the water world has, again, sculpted landscape, and you can do a lot of fun things with bodies of water in Unreal as well. You can create lakes, you can create rivers, you can control the flow of them. You can do all sorts of different things with water. So I barely scratched the surface with my little river that is literally just a squiggle there. It ends. The top-down view of this world is very funny because it's pretty much bare except for a little forest in the middle. But that's a little peek behind the curtain. But like I said, we modified the textures. So all I did was change the texture of the leaves to a redder hue, and it really changed the look of everything. And it was pretty easy to do. Again, more particle systems to give it more of an immersive quality. We got spores floating everywhere, and I think it really helps build the world. One thing Unreal is really good at is light. It is a very, very good light engine, and there's a lot of fine controls that you can do with just fixing the lighting. There's a whole panel called the Environmental Light Mixer, and there's like hundreds of different settings that you can choose for all the different lighting that Unreal can do. You can choose how reflective you want different surfaces to be, how dense you want the air, if you want light shafts. So I added some light shafts in this world because I really wanted it peeking through the trees to look as cool as possible. So Unreal is very good at lighting. So I am not a professional at Unreal Engine. I came into this knowing nothing about it. I started from zero. I had to teach myself how to use this program, and it did take several months to do that. And I'm sure I did not learn it in the most efficient way. Like, I made my computer crash a lot, and I'm sure people who know more might know how to avoid that. But there's a huge user base for this program. It's a free program. Anyone can download it, anyone can build with it. And with that comes a huge user base. And that means there is a lot of resources online. There's a lot of people who have posted tutorials. There's a lot of official documentation as well. And I really relied on all of that. I didn't post it here, but if you're interested in my resource list, it's super messy. It's literally a train of thought links, but I'm happy to share the stuff that I collected. One of my favorite things was a course. They have courses on Epic Games that will take you through. They have videos and also written instructions for you to follow, so they're super easy to follow. Your first hour in Unreal Engine key. It really just helps you figure out how to navigate in the user interface, because as soon as you open the program, it's like, what, what am I looking at? Like, I don't know what to click. I don't know what my mouse is doing. So that was super helpful. There's some other things as well. Easy Unreal, my favorite YouTube tutorial. That I had to call him out. He was my best friend through all of this. There are different places you can find assets. The Unreal Marketplace, the Quixel Megascans, they're actually now merged as of 2 days ago. I just found this out, into something called Fab, which I think still has a lot of free assets, but also paid assets you can use. There's a ton of stuff there. People are uploading things all the time. And also the NASA 3D library. They have spacecraft, they have rovers, things that you can just download and play with. You probably already know about that one. There's a lot of things that we can do with Unreal in the future. There's a lot more that I would love to do with it. I would love to take advantage of the real-time capabilities of it. It is a game engine, so you're making a game. And so it can be interactive. You can have, users pressing buttons, causing events to happen. And yeah, you're literally building a game. I would also love to use more real-world data. Experimented with this a little bit. We didn't end up going with it, but you can import height maps and actually make a landscape based off of real landscapes. So High Rise actually has a ton of maps like this that you can import in and create, recreate an actual place in space. So I would love to play more with that to make like 2-scale locations. But also, it can work in the dome too. There's Planetarium software that works in the dome. I know Digistar works. I don't know what else, but you can put this real-time content, interactive content, up on the dome, and I definitely want to try doing that at some point. But yeah, that is it. That is my. Thank you.
All right. Looks like we already have a question back here.
Excellent.
This is very cool, Carissa. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I am curious about a couple of things, but number one, as starting from fresh, what is the most important thing you would, advice you would impart on someone else who is going to try to start fresh like you did? And then the other question is, how do you foresee being able to bring more people into using this? I'm thinking about my students, of course, because I may not have time to do that. But have you thought about other ways to get more use throughout? So.
Yeah, I would definitely say for anyone starting from zero, going right to that your first hour in Unreal is like the best introduction. It is a starting at zero tutorial, so it's great for helping you just ease in. But past that, I definitely spent a lot of time finding things that I specifically needed for this and that were specifically useful for my use case. And I feel like, I would love to help and share out those resources because I also found a lot of stuff that wasn't useful to me at all. And so hopefully by weeding some of that out, but I would love to do a workshop on this eventually as well. Multiple people just went, yes. I didn't feel comfortable with it yet this year, but I think next year, because it's very usable. You just have to have a computer that's powerful enough. That's kind of also the biggest thing. It takes a beefy machine.
Sorry, on that, does it tell you anywhere like what the specs should be for a computer? Okay.
Yeah, you can find that out online. They'll have the specifications listed. There's a question right here.
Well, we're taking another couple questions. Can Terry start setting up?
Hi, have you come across any tools in Unreal to render directly to full dome PNG sequences, or is there some kind of pipeline through Photoshop or After Effects or whatever that you've had to, or have you even tried to go straight to full dome?
Yeah, so I haven't tried to do full dome format specifically, but you can export as frames. Actually, that's how I did all of my videos because I sometimes had it crashing in the middle of a render, which was very frustrating, so I could pick up where it left off. But yeah, it does handle, there's a lot of different ways to export media from Unreal. It's definitely baked in. So I'm not sure about Fisheye yet. There is?
You have to download it, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a plugin. that I didn't have time to play with yet. Yeah, so it definitely has the tools built in. You can export a 3D, a 360 game as well. So there are ways. If anyone wants to talk more about this later, like I'll be here the rest of the week. So, and I have my computer with me that I made it on. So if you want to see Unreal at all, I'm happy to show you. But just let me know.
All right, we are going to wait till exactly 9:45, so a few more seconds, but this is Terry Spears for A Universe of Possibilities. And you can go.
Alrighty. All right, hello everybody. My name is Terry Spears. I am the producer and animator at the Daniel M. Sorf Planetarium at the Milwaukee Public Museum. I'm going to be talking about our process on how we kind of make our shows and the way I kind of go through things and how you can get creative and make creative, immersive, entertaining shows for your planetarium, I guess. So the way we do that is through a couple of methods. We shoot footage with a camera. We make 3D models and animation, and then we use a bunch of assets and downloadable content. So filming for the dome, for us, we need 4K resolution, and it needs to be able to create at least 180-degree frames at 30 frames per second. In the past, we used a Red Dragon 6K camera with a fisheye lens on it. This camera is really cinematic, and it can do some really nice things. But for our purposes, it wasn't that great because with the 6K resolution, we only got like a third of that with the fisheye lens on it. As you can see here, and then we'd have to like scale up the footage by like 30% or so, and it would cause a bit of a loss in resolution, and we wouldn't get the best footage out of it sometimes, along with a host of other issues that we had with it. It was bulky, and it was a hassle to deal with. So since then, we've actually got a Insta360 Pro 2 camera. It's an 8K camera that has 6 fisheye lenses on it that shoot in all directions, creating 360-degree images that you can basically see in real time from the camera if you have the app, and you can. It has in-camera stitching, so you can kind of see what everything is looking like while you're filming. Yeah, this camera's been pretty great. Whoops. We basically can put the camera down, place our subjects, and then step out of the way and start filming. Once we film it, we bring it in with the Insta360 stitching app, download the footage, and then I bring it into After Effects. I bring the footage into After Effects. This is some Red K footage there. And then here's me bringing. So the footage comes in like this, and then I apply the VR converter effect onto the footage, and then change a couple of settings so that it's fisheye, and then we get, oh no, this thing's dying for somebody. So yeah, we put the fisheye effect on it, and then essentially we can edit the footage and rotate the camera around any way we want once we have it all in the computer and ready to go. And then it's just a matter of, rendering that sequence out the way you want it. And so yeah. So with that VR converter, we can also take a bunch of like VR stuff. So yeah, with that VR converter, we can also get like footage online of VR footage, 360 footage from Shutterstock, or NASA has a pretty cool 360 playlist that we've used in the past, and they have a bunch of videos from astronaut training. There's stuff from ISS on there, a bunch of rocket launches, and with that same process that I kind of just showed you, you can take that footage and render it out and put it up in the dome and create some fun stuff. Here's a quick comparison of how the Insta360 looks compared to the Red Dragon. So we get a nice, clean, clear footage out of this one as opposed to this little fuzzy one with the fisheye lens on there. And we also use a bunch of different other downloadable content for our footage and getting some nice images and stuff, along with HDRI images, and I don't know, we also do insert videos and do some green screen work as well. Along with our footage, I also do custom 3D models and animation. For that, I use Blender. It's a free program. It's pretty great. It's got a nice community, and pretty much anything you could want to try to attempt in there, there's a tutorial for it somewhere, and I find it pretty intuitive to use. But specifically for this group of people, it's great because it does have a panoramic camera in it, which makes it easy to kind of just make renders that can go directly onto your dome. And here's a little sample of how you can just start a scene, input your subject in, create a camera, adjust it so that it's looking at the subject, change it to the panoramic camera settings, make sure it's looking at the subject the way you want to, adjust your resolution, and there you have a dome-ready image that you can render out and fly around it in Blender, creating some fun animations with. So, so if you don't have a 3D modeler or an animator, there are a bunch of resources online, free and paid, that you can go to get some great models and animations. There's a Turbo Squid, which has a really great library of basically everything. There's a bunch of free stuff on there, paid stuff. Polyhaven is a really great site. It's got a bunch of free models, a bunch of free textures, HDRIs. It's really good, and it's all free. Textures.com, they recently switched over to like a subscription-based thing, but it used to be free, but we use that sometimes. KitBash 3D has like these really great world-building models where you can download pretty much a whole city and mix and match the buildings however you want. Those are paid, but it's really cool. And then for animation, you have animations on TurboSquid as well, and Mixamo, which is a free animation website where you can download free animations. So if you just sign up for an Adobe account, you can log into the site, and then they have like a library of models and animations that you can kind of just download and import into Blender or whatever 3D software you use. You can actually import your own models into Mixamo, and it'll automatically rig them and apply the animations as well. So if that's something you're interested in trying out, definitely give it a try. That's all free and pretty intuitive, easy to use. So, and then here's just an example of how we, excuse me, download models, and then I create scenes with some of the downloaded assets that I find online. So here's the NASA 3D library. Downloaded this model. I imported it into Blender along with some other models that I got online, and created this really cool scene that we used in one of our shows. I did some rigging and animation to the model, added our 360 camera or our panoramic camera, added an HDRI, simple lighting, and was able to animate it within a matter of minutes. So find it all pretty fun and easy to do for me. I don't know. So yeah. So with this process, we've created about 20 shows, and yeah, it's just about thinking of different ways to be creative and engage your dome. I like to, go about, think about the audience and how I can interact with them, whether I'm having a dinosaur come in and bite the whole audience, or having things fly around, just making sure everybody's looking around and having a good time. So, and with that, you can basically create anything with those techniques and have a universe of possibilities. That's me, some of my information. You can check me out on Instagram, see some of my work, contact information, and that's about it. And I'll just play this little demo if you guys have any questions. This is just some of the stuff I've done using that same process.
For the Blender panoramic camera, you're using the Cycles engine.
Yep.
Do you know, is there an alternative for the Eevee engine?
No, I don't think there is,
Yeah.
but
I like the Eevee and I can't find a panoramic camera for it. But
yeah,
I'm stuck-
Cycles works really great.
I'm stuck with Cycles, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, you get some really. Okay, yeah, I haven't.
Yeah, I was just going to speak on that because it also tied in with the Unreal talk. The best way to get Unreal at the moment, unless you have the plugin, or if you're using Eevee, is cube mapping. Basically, you take 6 renders and then you do a big cube with them, and then you can throw that on the dome.
Yeah, well, that's why I like using the Cycles. It's just drag and drop basically, and you can get some nice renders out. Here's also a little video of our studio as well, that you guys can check out.
So I started with Blender good couple of years ago, and I've been trying to keep up with it. But every time I look at it, there's a new version, gigantic node system for doing stuff, and it's like, how do you keep up with it all? Because like it seems almost like a completely different piece of software than what I started with 5 years ago, and it's outpacing me.
Oh yeah.
So I struggle with that, and I want to know if you've got any tips or.
Basically, I just do it project based. If I'm looking to try something new, I don't even know like all of the features that it has to offer, but basically, if I'm looking to try something out, look it up and take it project by project and kind of learn as I'm working and apply those things like that.
All right, we have time for maybe one more question, but if Dylan will start setting up.
To add to what James was asking, what Terry said, if you're working with Blender on something, you don't have to upgrade to the latest version. Stick with what you're working with until your project is done. Because every 6 months they introduce a whole new bunch of stuff, and you can't keep up. Yep, just stick with one until you're done with the project, yeah.
All right, next we have Dylan Borgerding with Dungeons and Dragons in the Dome. All right, go for it.
All right, what's up, gamers? I was waiting all week to say that. I'm here to talk. Well, my name's Dylan Borgerding. I'm from the Adler Planetarium. I'm here to talk about a project that I've been kind of bouncing around, playing with for like the better part of a year. And so it's Dungeons and Dragons in the Planetarium Dome. And to start off, for anybody who is not familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, really quickly, it's a tabletop role-playing game. There are many like it, but this one's my favorite. It is a collaborative storytelling environment where you sit around and there is a DM, somebody who's sort of like the architect for the world or the setting, and then you have players which inhabit characters within that setting, and they take actions, which is usually, the result of which is determined usually by something random. In Dungeons & Dragons, it's a d20, a 20-sided die. You roll that, and depending on the number you roll, and some other modifiers perhaps, that determines the outcome. So there's a little bit of randomness, but it's also about coming together and creating a story between a group of people. And it's also a lot about like immersing yourself into this world, which is where I think bringing it into the planetarium could be a lot of fun. And so Here's why I think playing D&D in a planetarium would be really cool. It's sort of just like what I said. It's a pretty obvious connection in my mind. We display all sorts of fantastical things like going to different planets and making our audiences feel like they're out in space or on the surface of Mars. All that same technology can be used in the same sense to transport us to fantastical worlds, to Middle Earth, to the USS Enterprise, all sorts of things. Really, the possibilities are endless. And so, that brings us to the natural question, what if we did play Dungeons & Dragons in the Planetarium Dome? I'm so glad you asked. And so I have a couple of different ways that I think this event could be done in terms of like formatting. If you were going to play TTRPG in the Dome, this would be my first example would be like a public event. That's where you're having like a cast of players and like a crew running things behind the scenes, and also like a live audience. This might be something that you like sell tickets to. You could also incorporate some like audience interaction. One good example of a live Dungeons & Dragons event is 20-Sided Tavern, if you've ever heard of them before. It's an off-Broadway show where they play D&D live, and they have like a phone app that the audience can use to vote on certain outcomes of things. And it's a really good example of what something like a Planetarium live event for Dungeons & Dragons could look like. You can also see this is the photo of their stage. They have like 3 projected screens behind them, which is really just a sad attempt at what we could do in the planetarium. You could make that a whole lot more immersive in our spaces. You could also have the opportunity in this and pretty much all of the ways that I think Dungeons & Dragons can be played in the Dome. You can collaborate with local communities, local game stores, gaming clubs to sort of bolster maybe attendance, but also to tap on them for resources. You could ask a DM to come and lead a game, things like that. And then this is also a good way to contact or get a hold of people maybe you wouldn't normally reach when it comes to bringing people into the Dome. Those TTRPG people might not have another reason to come to the planetarium, and this would be a good reason for them. Something to keep in mind, one of the challenges when you're thinking about something like this is copyrighted material. Dungeons & Dragons is copyrighted. You can't go and sell tickets for a Dungeons & Dragons event unless you're licensed. But what 20-Sided Tavern did, and what I think is a good option, is when they first started out, before they became licensed like they are now, they played a version of Dungeons & Dragons, or a TTRPG, that was extremely similar to Dungeons & Dragons, but legally distinct. And that is what, that's one of the options that you could do. There's also all sorts of different ways to go get around that. You could make your own TTRPG, for example. The other more, I think, likely scenario that somebody could run a Dungeons & Dragons event is using it in an educational setting, maybe like with a school group. And just right off the bat, playing Dungeons & Dragons, before you start adding things inherently into a campaign or a story, you get learning things like arithmetic. When you roll a dice, you have to add a number to it to calculate a score. Right off the bat, you're learning a little bit. As well as there's the storytelling element, so you're learning about character arcs and story arcs, all of that baked in just from your first time playing without really going any further into trying to make it more educational. But pretty much any topic can be integrated into a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. You have to be, the sky's the limit. As creative as you can be, the more stuff you can pack into a campaign. For example, well, really, there are all sorts of free resources in general, but also specifically for educators. Dungeons & Dragons has options for teachers in qualified institutions to get all sorts of free stuff. And NASA released a TTRPG, The Lost Universe, which is all about trying to find the Hubble Space Telescope. And in that, they incorporate all sorts of astronomical topics like black holes, rogue planets, globular clusters. And so as you're playing, you can learn about those things. And all the work in terms of writing that campaign is already done for you. And there's all sorts of stuff like that online. And then the secret third thing, this would be like a private event. I think this is probably least likely of the 3. You could have somebody like rent out your space and play a private event, or the other option would be like a development thing. If you're having a fundraiser, this could be some sort of like goal, or like if donors donate a certain amount, maybe they can be entered into a raffle to win a free night of Dungeons & Dragons in the planetarium. Either way, profit. And now I wanted to show you a little bit about my construction of the experience. I've just done a little bit of work coming up with a prototype of how something like this might look in the Dome. And I used Digistar 6. I've created an example for a scene using all Digistar native assets. You have a forest panorama, a cloudy sky overhead, and a rainbow back there. Maybe it just rained. And this is really quick to make. You can make all sorts of these things to help set your story. And this is really just scratching the surface. If you use things like, I don't know, Unreal to create really immersive environments, really the sky is the limit. And then here I made a globular cluster puzzle. This goes back to the Lost Universe, that NASA TTRPG. Within that, the players are faced with a puzzle where they are looking at a projection of a globular cluster, and there's a hidden message or a couple hidden messages in there, and they can access them by changing what wavelength of light is being projected from red to blue. And so I constructed that in Digistar. You can this would be like an interactive thing. You maybe hand the players an iPad, have them move around in the globular cluster projection, and adjust the wavelength. You can see you have a little message hidden in there as you move towards the blue wavelength. Hubble found. So that's a little bit of a clue for the players in that adventure. And this video is a little bit longer than I expected. Okay. And then finally I have a dice roller. This is just fun. They're in, for example, 20-sided tavern. They have a big foam dice that they roll for your more dramatic rolls to add some tension to things, and this would be like our planetarium equivalent. You could roll something on the dome. See if I can play that one more time. Oh god. Yeah, so it's just a fun option. Well, let's see if I can go back. You saw it. Yeah, so that's just a fun option, something to add a little bit more spice to your games that also has some audio in it. I think it might be on the cloud. If not, I can upload it where it has like the audio effects of a dice being rolled and like bouncing. So that's a lot of fun. But that's pretty much all that I had. I hope I got you thinking about ways that you could play Dungeons & Dragons in your dome or other TTRPGs. It's just a fun experience. I think it'd be really cool. Thank you very much.
Anyone have any questions?
Hi, Dylan. Have you given any thought to any of the issues surrounding like the number of players, especially like in the school group sort of issue?
Yeah. So if you're in a school group, if you're doing like a large group, I think adding in audience interaction, if you're doing like maybe a small group of players are up on at the table, then you could have other students interacting in some way where they're like voting on decisions, something like that. You could also like rotate every few minutes, have new players jump in. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. You could even have like sections of your audience control certain characters and have them vote on what actions they take. And you could, to make it a little bit easier, like restrict their choices to like 1 or 2 or 3 things that they could do. And that way it makes that, it still gives them onus in their decisions and agency, but makes it a little bit smoother and easier to do with a large group.
I'm a little annoyed with myself for asking this question. Have you done pilots of this program at Adler, and how have they gone so far?
I have not. This is still super early on. This is mostly just like a thing that I did in my free time if I had a few moments. And so all I've done is sit in the dome by myself and play that dice roller over and over again.
Dylan, I wanted to add a suggestion to your production techniques. I've had some a little bit of limited success with making cool fisheye AI-generated fantasy imagery. That'd be a really pretty fast way to get a lot of different scenery that you could put right on the dome. I used Midjourney, and I know it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, there are a ton of options for ways to create a scene for this. There's Unreal, there's AI. You can go to a tavern-looking bar and take a panoramic photo there. You can do all sorts of things to really expand on this idea.
I've got one of my own before I pass it on.
Sure.
So do you intend for there to actually be characters or anything on the screen, or is it just going to be the scenes?
In my mind, I don't know about player characters, but I think it'd be really cool if you had like a goblin encounter, for example, and you had a bunch of little goblins show up on the dome, just to add some leprechauns, perhaps, if you've seen that on the Digistar cloud. So yeah, I think there's a lot of room to do it. I'm in the really early stages of developing this idea, but yeah, there's absolutely room for that.
So I just had like a comment and a question. Like, it would be really cool to actually like model out a dungeon and like actually use like the controller or whatever to like make those decisions of which way you can go. But how long would a game actually take to play?
Well, that's really up to the game that you design. I've played games that are under 2 hours. Those are really quick, but also there are games that can last like 3 times that, or can go on for several sessions. I've gotten a little bit better about reducing my playtime to exactly when I think it'll end. But yeah, it can be a challenge to predict that, and there are tricks that the Dungeon Master can do to kind of speed things along.
Yeah, like building the characters and stuff. Would you do that all during the session, or would you like come with that?
Well, most of the time I do character building before a session, or I would do like a pre-generated character. This might work better for like school groups, is you have a sheet that a student can just pick up and use right away, no building required.
All right, we still have time for a couple more questions, but if Jeffrey would start setting up.
Dylan, I look forward to seeing how you develop this more. I'm also wondering if this could also be a framework just for any kind of choose your own adventure type programming, not necessarily in the the adventuring landscape. But please do continue working on this. We want to see more of it.
I absolutely plan to. Yeah, thank you.
This is really just a quick comment for everybody, but while the name Dungeons & Dragons is copywritten and trademarked, the rules for Dungeons & Dragons have been entered into the Creative Commons. So you can actually go and get essentially all the rules for free and most of the names for free as well.
Yeah, that is true for the SRD. They have a section on their website that you can see what's open for free. But they also have a good portion of content that's come out recently that is really cool, but also copyrighted. So be careful, definitely.
Which edition you playing, Dylan?
I started in 5th edition, not the most recent edition anymore, and then I have gone to play 3.5 and a few other editions here and there, but 5th edition is my home. That's what I play. All right, I think that's...
I'm starting to think that they intentionally, whoever makes these conferences, they look at the best talk and then they stick me after it every time. I'm not sure.
Or opposite it.
It's becoming a running joke, I think.
All right, so we're going to start our next talk with Jeffrey Stark, sharing stuff I made this year.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Buddy Stark. Well, officially it's Jeffrey Stark, but everyone knows me as Buddy Stark. I manage the planetarium at the University of Michigan, the Museum of Natural History specifically. They've got a few planetariums. And I'd like to try and do my part in adding a little bit of value to the community by just sharing some stuff that I've made in the last year or so. The first thing, very quickly, is I've made some custom constellations. This is not a particularly difficult thing, but those of you that have done it know that it is a bit of a tedious thing. So if the work is already done, let's share it out there. Professor in the classics department at the university got a grant to, I'm going to grab this actually, to, okay, I'm going to hold it here, like her grant was to make very, very accurately the Ptolemaic model, or the way that Ptolemy would have drawn constellations in his day. And so then they asked me to put it on the planetarium. So we painstakingly, based on like star catalog numbers, made sure these were all very, very accurately drawn. For the most part, they're very similar, just some subtle changes, but there are a few instances where it does really stick out. For instance, Scorpius has claws, right? Libra didn't exist to Ptolemy. That would come later from other cultures. And also, if you look at Sagittarius to the left, you can see that it actually looks like an archer, the way that Ptolemy would have drawn it, not so much like a teapot. So there are some differences in this set. So the QR code is the same for all three of these, so don't worry about getting each one. It just takes you to a Google Drive, which has all this in there for you. The Hawaiian star families is much easier. There's only 4 of them, right? But they're these very cool, very large sort of constellations because there's one for each season. I had another professor ask me to make these. And then finally, we partner with the Center for Chinese Studies at the university every February to do a special Lunar New Year show, and this year we made the Lunar Mansions, which is sort of the equivalent of, you know, the Western zodiac is where we keep track of the sun and whatever constellation it's in. That's that part of the zodiac. Well, the Chinese culture has that for the moon. The different places of the sky that the moon is in, they track that, and those become 28 lunar mansions. So those are also available there. You can also search the Digistar Cloud if you're using a Digistar there's some artwork that lines up really well with my little line models for those lunar mansions. I want to spend the bulk of my time talking about a closed captioning software that I made this last year. This is very, very recent, so I have it on a flash drive, but it probably still has some bugs because I'm still testing some stuff, so it might be worth waiting until next year's conference to actually get it from me. So like most planetariums, we have an always-on assisted listening device system, but in the last year or so, there's been a really big uptick at my planetarium of people who are coming who this is not useful for because they cannot hear at all, and we don't really have a good option for them, or at least we didn't. As I looked into this, because I was trying to solve this this issue for our museum, I found out that we technically weren't ADA compliant because digital theaters that are providing films are supposed to have closed captioning devices for their audience members. I point this out because I'm not the ADA police, so like of course you've got your own stuff going on, but if you're trying to sell this to your administration, this information might be an arrow in your quiver that helps, you know, sort of light a fire, because technically you do need this in your theater. So as I started looking into options, I couldn't find anything that I felt really worked for me, because either the device was going to be crazy bright. I'm a fairly small planetarium, so any brightness in the dome becomes very noticeable very quickly. Or it was like the commercial ones for movie theaters that do get nice and dim, were, you know, you're spending $3,000 on something that just displays a little bit of text, and that felt a little silly. Like, why does it cost so much money today to just display text? So I set about making my own. And the way that I got this working is that your planetarium software, any modern planetarium software, if it can communicate with your lighting software, it's able to communicate with this closed caption server that I made, because it's the same network protocol. So I added a line before each of my show play, like if I'm running a film, each of my show play commands right before that, I created a little socket that will send a signal to my closed caption server as soon as I run the show. And the nice thing about this is that I don't have to do anything extra, right? I don't have to train my presenters in how to use this. The system is just always pushing subtitles, whether they're being used or not, right? And so it's just a very, because I didn't want to have to deal with one more thing to train people, one more thing to remember, because it doesn't happen very often, right? So like expecting my presenter to know 6 months from now when it gets asked for exactly how to work this system didn't seem very reasonable. So it's just always there. Then the closed caption server, which for me, I just installed this software on the same computer that's running my lighting software, because neither of them are very resource heavy, so it doesn't take a lot. So you've probably already got a computer that is capable of doing this in your system. That takes that signal and it starts monitoring a subtitle file, a standard subtitle file that you can find anywhere, and it pushes them to any connected devices that are running the client version of this software. And so then those, which can be Android tablets or Windows tablets, I don't deal with iPads because they make it so hard to get things on the Apple devices, so that's just my own bias, sorry. But any Android tablet or Windows tablet, they just display the text. This is what the server looks like. If you choose to leave it open, the software is, the server side is fairly ugly because it doesn't need to be very pretty. So it shows you the subtitle files that are available to you, and it gives you a little printout of some things that are happening. It's pretty basic. But the client side looks a little bit prettier. This is what the tablet looks like. It's very simple, it's very clean. In the top left, there is little buttons for adjusting the size of the font. The user can adjust the size of the text, and you can adjust the color to a few sort of pre-selected colors if they need to. The drawbacks to my approach is that you do need to provide these tablets. It's not reasonable to think someone's going to have my random app on their device, and also it needs to be on your planetarium's network, so you probably don't want them connecting to that anyway. So you do have to find, they can be relatively low end. It's not a particularly powerful software, so you don't need a high-end device to run this. You do need to either find or create a subtitle file. Again, it's a standard type of file, but your show would need to be able to use it. And of course, if you're doing a live show, what I'm talking about really isn't super useful. We use Google Live Transcribe if we need subtitles for a live show, which works fairly well. Finally, the last couple minutes of my talk, just as a sort of a getting it fresh in everyone's head. A couple years ago, I presented that I had made my own lighting software for my planetarium. And there we go. And I just wanted to report back that we've been using it as our primary lighting software for over a year now, and it works fairly smoothly. It does everything that you would sort of expect a modern lighting system to do. It does like the nice, pretty rainbow colors, and it's like less than a second response kind of timing thing, so you can get some really specific stuff going. So if you need, if this is useful to you, before I talk about that, another thing that I did was my building, which is a fairly new building, I have my cove lights in my planetarium, and then I also have a second cove around the back of the room, like around the walls that are around you. And they had installed this, like $20,000 worth of LED lights, but before my time, something about that particular aspect of the project fell through, and they never connected the lights to the system. So I had these great lights but couldn't use them because they weren't hooked up. And so I was able to connect that second cove to my lighting software. And so now I have independent control of two different coves in my dome, which adds for a lot of sort of fun little effect because no one expects the lights to come from behind them, which is kind of a fun thing. Anyway, I point all this out because this is a large enough project that the university is sort of aware of it. So before I can share it out with other institutions, I have to talk to the administration about exactly what that looks like and how we go about that. So if this, and you can kind of see the user interface, you can make buttons like you would expect to with a modern lighting engine, that kind of thing. So this is useful to you if you're looking for something that would allow you to use your lights in a more intuitive, more natural way, but you can't spend $30,000 on stuff. Let me know because I'll take a more proactive approach about making sure. Right now, this is a back burner thing for me because it's working. It's doing what I need it to do. So I haven't really given it a lot of thought. But if I know that others would like to be able to use it as well, then I'll start those conversations back up. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. I had two really quick questions. The first one was when you do the live captioning, do you just have them use their own devices that they already have? And then the second one was, I think I missed it, what software were you using to make the constellations?
Yeah, very good. So yeah, the constellations are the one thing in this talk that sort of requires Digistar. They're VLA models, which is native to Digistar, so if you're not using that, it might not be useful to you. Yeah, there might be a way to get VLA models into other ones, but I'm not sure. For the closed captioning software, you do have to provide an iPad because it needs to have my software installed, or not an iPad, a tablet, because it needs to have my software installed on that, and it has to be on your planetarium's Wi-Fi, which again, you probably don't want to be sharing with, other people can kind of start messing with your. No, Google Live Transcribe is just a software that you can download. It's like you can put that on any device. Some people, if they have hard of hearing issues, they might have it on their phone anyway. Just instruct them to turn it on, and it's gotten really good. Like if your presenter is reasonably coherent with their microphone, it does a really nice job of capturing most things. Right? If you start getting into really specific planetarium stuff, like they're talking about Europa, it might not caption Europa right, but 90% of what they say is just going to show up right on their device, which is really nice.
So you mentioned live shows, and then you had like everything else, and I'm not quite sure what those are. Are they just full dome films, or are they what?
Yeah, so the purpose of this captioning software is for a film, right? So we run about half live shows and half, there's a live segment, but it's the main portion of the show is a film. And so when we run those films, I'm looking for something that would allow me to give someone captions.
So for the purpose of a film, have you or anyone else just considered making, I know some software can like run one thing on top of another. So have you considered like making a separate film to run on top that's just the closed captioning?
Yeah, so
but you're trying not to put it on the screen, right?
exactly. So that's what's called open caption, which is when everyone can see it, and closed caption when it's on a device. And technically, by ADA, we have to have a closed caption option, not necessarily an open caption. And there's also the drawback that you're sort of forcing everyone to have this text in front of them, where a lot of people might not want it.
Hey, thanks, buddy, for this work. 2 questions. Number one, your closed captioning software. Is there a potential for multi-language? So sometimes you get students that are Spanish speaking, for example, or EL, and you have to give them. That's the first question. I guess we'll do that one. I'll save the second one.
Sure. Well, so that's really easy. Again, because it uses the industry standard for subtitle files, if you have Spanish subtitles, it will pull Spanish subtitles.
Like at the same time, though, like does it have multiple channels of subtitles in the software? So you could be like, well, you're Spanish and you're Hmong and you're Chinese, and so I've got like multiple channels of SRTs.
Not right now, but there's no reason we couldn't. That's a good thought. I'll look into adding that.
Sometimes you have that in classes. And the second question is with your hardware, even a tablet set all the way to black, the contrast is still wretched and it's still bright. Have you had to put neutral density filters, or like how did you really get it dark, dialed down where you want it?
Yeah, so I mean, if you need to, if that becomes crucial, the popular thing is the Flux software. You can, it's not necessarily neutral density, but you can really start to dim those down past what they would do natively, and it gets it to me to a point that it's acceptable. I mean, it's always going to be an LED display that's kicking up light, but it gets it pretty dark.
Okay, so you don't have to use any physical films on the surface. You find that you're happy with the digital masking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some people do, and it depends on sort of how specific. Like some people get really specific about how dark they want their theater, and then a neutral density filter would probably be a good choice. Okay. I've seen those before.
Thank you.
Yep.
If Mike can start setting up.
Just a comment on captioning. We run open captioning for all of our shows, and we have not had one complaint. Our DEI person came to us and said, just do it for every show. And I didn't think I thought people would complain. They don't, at least openly. But so we love it, and we do open caption for all our shows. Just write a file for it, and it's no problem.
We have time for one more question.
So you said you had your constellations as VLA files. What software are you using to create VLA files? Just part of Digistar?
Yeah, I used that Digistar utility thing.
Okay.
So it was like manually going through and putting each. Well, I don't remember what the Hipparchus number or something that they used for that. So it was tedious, but I just used Digistar.
Okay.
All right, now we're going to start Adler round 3 as soon as it gets on the screen. Mike Smail with From Chicago to the Multiverse, Global Voices, Local Story.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Smail with the Adler Planetarium, as you heard. I'd like to start things off by asking all of you to rewind your mental clocks back to December 2nd, 2019. It's a very different world. Taylor Swift only had one song on the Billboard Hot 100, and it was barely in the top 20. And that was the date that a small group, the Adler, got together to start working on the concepts of what would become Naya and the Multiverse, our new planetarium production. We had a small team that met. We basically looked at, excuse me. We went through our current lineup of shows, topics that we covered, content, audiences, who are we serving, who are we not serving, and we realized that kind of the larger team had a bigger sort of role to play in this. So we wouldn't just be making a show with 4 or 5 people at the planetarium. So we pulled together focus groups of upwards of 30 staff, really ranging all the way from teen volunteers up to our CEO. We kicked around ideas, presentation styles, and ended up with a sort of general concept for a show, which is Why is the Night Sky Dark? You might know that as Olber's Paradox, and also a number of sort of important experience goals and things that we wanted to come through in the course of the production. We also, very important, we wanted to tell a Chicago story. Whether it was a story focused on a local protagonist or indigenous cultures or science that was developed or grown in Chicago, it's a very important part of what we do. At the Adler, it is our mission. We connect people to the universe and to each other through the sky that we all share. While we were working, once we had sort of the concept developed and we were kind of out looking for funding, the core team also started kicking around the idea of the show taking on an Afrofuturist bent. Afrofuturism, if you're not familiar with what that is basically a look at the intersection of the African peoples and peoples of the African diaspora with science and technology. It's kind of the point where those meet. Think Black Panther, Sun Ra, Basquiat, and I'll put you in the general neighborhood. Once we got funding, we also started to take a look at, well, basically how to get started. How would we start with the story? You know, we had that idea, but we put together a sort of a short list of authors, people we'd be interested to approach to work on the show. Top of our list was Yatasha Womack, who's a local, actually Afrofuturist artist and author, and we'd worked with her on some previous events at the Adler. She was super enthused, super happy to help, jumped on board right away. And that was a pretty great first step. You know, it's nice when you start your project and like the first domino falls and you're like, all right, this is going to be good. We're in a good place here. But you'll remember that we had an idea, and it didn't feel right to go to a person and be like, hey, we'd like you to come write a show for us, and we want it to be about this one exact thing that we've already developed, and just go do that, please. So to really respect the artistic and creative talents of our partners, we pulled together a couple of other theories, a couple of other general ideas, but we were also very clear that we were open to their ideas, and we were open to what they wanted to create a show about. And it's a little bit small up here, but one of the ideas, there is multiple universes, multiverses, and Yatasha Womack came to that idea pretty quickly. Multiverse, again, just general familiarity, is the idea that there are multiple universes that exist together in the same space. So a little bit different than the one sort of visible universe that we're all used to talking about in planetarium shows, right? And of course, it's also quite the hot topic, thanks to A24 and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I, of course, must remind you sets a very realistic and achievable visual effects goal for your friendly local neighborhood nonprofit planetarium. So thanks, Marvel, for all that. So when you're working with partners on things, you're going to get surprises. So, for example, we had contracted Yatasha Womack and then also Taylor Witten, who's a local creative and event producer, to work on script treatment for us. They delivered a script treatment. They also delivered a visual treatment, which we were not expecting at all. We were expecting a script, and then we were going to basically make the visual treatment work based on our kind of assets and budget and what we had available to us. So that was a big surprise. But we rolled with it. So again, wanting to visualize our partners' visions as best we could, we went through, so there's a kind of a section of the script on the left there, and then sort of a very, very simplified production plan on the right for that particular scene. And the long and the short of it was that we very quickly realized this was going to be the most challenging production we had done in at least 15 years. There is fast motion, there's fantastical science, it's completely animated, there's 3D animated characters, things that we haven't done in a very long time. So this was kind of the first part where we really realized this is going to be something we cannot do ourselves. This is something we need to reach out, and we need to pull in a much larger group to help us. For example, the last time we made a show with animated characters, we had our friends at the Sesame Workshop to help us with that production and their expertise and their budgets. We didn't have that here. So we had to kind of figure out and go, let's do it ourselves. Let's figure out where to go. So where do we start? Well, the first place we started with was with Taylor and Yatasha, and we asked them for recommendations, suggestions. Who are some folks that you would recommend who are, this is in their wheelhouse? Where should we start? So they recommended an artist to us who did concept sketches for the characters in the show. And these were sort of our first glimpse at what the characters could become. Some of these ideas sort of kept, some of these ideas sort of stayed through. Other ideas did not, such as Luis is a pufferfish. We decided not to move forward with that particular visualization. But again, these are just sketches, though. These are just 2D drawings, right? So we were creating 3D characters. We had to animate them, and somebody had to do that work as well. You know, we can't just put these up on the dome. So we reached out to Calabash, which is a local animation studio in Chicago. They do a lot of commercial and sort of professional visual work. Obviously, they'd never worked on a planetarium show before, so after kind of going through with them some of the basic 101 tips and tricks how you produce for the dome, they then build out sort of final character art and actual 3D models for the characters that we had in the show. And then from then moving forward, it's a process. The show had 28 scenes, which is, if you're making a show, that's a lot of scenes. It's way more than we normally do. Getting back to, again, the sort of like fast motion and fast kind of visual style. So the process from there begins, starting from storyboards, starting from 2D sketches, and beginning to incorporate sort of motion paths and those 3D models into the scenes. This is the multi-world scene, kind of a work in progress of that. So a lot of fun as the process goes on to kind of see things coming together. Audio talent, that's another big thing. We brought in a couple of, found some local talent to vocalize the characters. And this is something else, sometimes you do have to push back with partners. So for example, the show has 4 human characters. They all had speaking roles, they all had lines, and that's a lot. If you're dealing with animated characters, you've got to make the mouths move, you've got to lip sync, you've got to do a lot. So that was the point where we pushed back a little bit and we said, no, we're going to change this. We're going to keep the two main characters. They're going to have speaking lines. They're going to have vocal lines. Everybody else, we're going to do word bubbles, which allowed us to simplify production and keep things moving forward. Beyond starting from partners, sometimes you do have to kind of reach out. You have to go a little bit further out. And we have the benefit of having worked with production partners before on other shows, which is a nice thing to have. So we reached out. This is a Dikenga cosmogram. This is a Congo, kind of a cycle of life from birth to death, life and the afterlife. And we had an artist who worked on one of our previous shows, an Unreal artist, who was able to visualize a really stunning 3D environment version of the Dikenga cosmogram, which is really, honestly, one of my kind of favorite scenes in the show. But then sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to reach out. And I'll tell you, the internet does make it pretty easy to find artists, to find animators, to find professionals. But then it's a work in progress. So sometimes you have to pivot. So this is this is a ceremonial headdress that is in the collection of the Art Institute of Chicago. And there's one of these depicted in the script treatment for the show. And it's like, great, the Art Institute's right down the street. We'll talk to them. We'll go and we'll photograph it. We'll do a little 3D photogrammetry thing. We'll make a 3D model and we'll work this into our show, this Dogon headdress. And we never really heard back from them. So we had to pivot. We decided to pivot out. We found some people who made this content on their own. Charissa in Ghana is a 3D environmental artist, but he had also made similar ceremonial masks. So he put together a really phenomenal 3D model of one that we were able to bring into our show. Other nice thing about working with partners, especially good partners, is that you can pass them other work. If you get something, it's great. You can keep working with them. So Charissa also worked on a Wakongo River scene, which you can see here. Good artists, no other good artists. This is a tilt brush artist that was recommended to us by one of our other collaborators. Tilt brush is a VR painting tool. We pitched her on this scene, this Crossroads scene. It was completely different than what we expected, but thoroughly impactful and thoroughly happy with how it came out. I'm going to start flying. Sometimes you get bad ideas. Sometimes you get recommendations for people that don't really give good product, like this person that was recommended to us for the title treatment who couldn't even spell the name of the character right and quoted us like 10 times the market rate for their work. Sometimes you have to walk away from people. You have to use your judgment. And then sometimes things take longer. We had an artist who said, oh yes, I can do this 8K volumetric scene with characters and backgrounds. It took over a year to do this scene. Everything is going to take longer than you think it's going to take. Gray was our actual timeline, or was our planned timeline. Yellow was our actual timeline. We thought the script would take 3 months. It took a year. We thought animation would take a year. It took 2 years. You got to plan for that. You have to build that into your timelines. There's unknown unknowns. Our lawyer tipped us off that there were copyright concerns with our original name for the show, Kia and the Multiverse, so we had to change it. And it's not just a matter of changing one word. If you say in your head, Kia, and then Naya, feel your mouth, feel how your head moves. We had to go back and reanimate the scenes. We had to re-record dialogue. We had to rechange graphical artifacts. So there's a lot in the mix there. Local sound artists that we worked with. There was again a recommendation. Dex Coleman, he's part of Chance the Rapper's Social Experiment Collaborative. He is a producer and he composed the music for the show, which is really amazing. We're really stoked to get him. And in the end, we ended up with approximately 50 creatives who touched some part of the show, and they were from around the world: Africa, Canada, Europe, Southeast Asia. Whether it's a sound effect, a single 3D model, a still image, a background, a full scene. It was a phenomenal task. A lot to keep on top of. Not something I'd necessarily recommend to anybody, but a challenge that can be rewarding nonetheless. I'd also like to invite you to come to the Dome tonight at 8:30. You can actually watch the show for yourself over at the museum. We'd love to see you there. And I think I'm probably totally out of time for questions, but how are we doing, Heidi? Woo! Anybody? Or, yeah, anybody? No? What was the budget? Budget for the show was $1 million. And that $1 million included money for staff time, which is not something we've done in show production budgets in the past. So about 45% of that went to just paying staff time, and the rest went to external partners, production, marketing, all the. We also purchased some new rendering infrastructure as part of this. That was about 10% of the budget, so that was worked into it as well. So, cool. Yeah, thanks. Ryan, come up. Anybody else? I'll be at my booth in the afternoon. Come find us. Come talk.
Looks like we are about ready, so do the introduction so you can get started as soon as ready. Our next talk is Ryan Wyatt with Astrophysical Overachievers, Spark, and Visualization-Based Storytelling. Go right ahead.
I was feeling so bad for you when you were setting up. Now I feel the same. Anyway, my name is Ryan Wyatt. I'm the Senior Director of Morrison Planetarium and Science Visualization at the California Academy of Sciences, and I want to tell you about a very different production from the one you've just heard of. This is about our show Spark. I called it Astrophysical Overachievers because we actually incorporated more astrophysical simulations in this show than we've done in any of our other previous productions. So it was a wild ride in a very different way from the Naya production. So this is actually a story that I've wanted to tell for a long time, which is about the connection that we all have to the universe, which is through the elemental origins or elements. And it's something that's been in the back of my head for a while, but really the story, the science story, is only settled-ish in the last decade. So this was the right time to do it. And because you're seeing this before you've seen the show, maybe, which we'll show tonight at 8 p.m., you're getting the haven't seen the show yet behind the scenes, because there are a couple things that you can ask me about later in terms of how we achieve the production. But I just want to tell you about a couple story elements and then a lot about the visualizations and the data that went into the show. So this, if you've ever seen this image of the periodic table of the elements, it's a different way of looking at the elements. It's about where the elements come from. And as we looked at how we wanted to tell this story, we kept coming back to the idea that we really wanted to show the periodic table. And so this is a straight-on view of sort of how we rendered it in the show, but we wanted to test that with audiences. So we actually, using our presenter team at the time, took this image, which is kind of a free image off the web, and we asked questions of people about whether they understood it and whether they understood the concepts they would need to understand to follow the story of the show. And that's really just that each one of the squares represents an element. They had a basic idea of what an element was, and it's organized somehow. And that's really all you need to know about the periodic table to understand how it is used in the show. But it's one of the great opportunities that we have working in an institution as a production team, because we can go out and actually have conversations with our visitors. And I don't normally show spreadsheets in presentations, but this was the other challenge that really came to the fore immediately. And this is just a spreadsheet we used during the production. It was just like a list of all the things that we were going to show, because to talk about the origin of elements, you need to talk about, we decided that we were going to talk about a core collapse supernova, a type 1a supernova, a colliding neutron stars, and then a sort of planetary nebula. And those are 4 very different phenomena, but you kind of need all of those to fill in the periodic table. Most of our iron and nickel, for example, comes from type 1a supernova. So we wanted to tell each part of that story, but each one of these phenomena is occurring over a wide range of scales. So yeah, you have a supernova remnant that is light years across, but at the core of that is an object the size of a city. So how do we convey, and it turns out that when you're traveling through space and watching something expand, you don't have necessarily the visual cues to understand that you're moving towards something, so it appears to get bigger in frame, or it's actually growing larger. So we needed to think about visual components that could help disentangle that. I hope that will be more evident when you see the show, but we decided that we would introduce scale elements. And this is actually not how they appear in the show. This was my sketch that I provided the visual artists. We decided we wanted to, roughly, based on that spreadsheet, We're going to talk about things that are city-sized. If you don't recognize it, that's San Francisco all the way on the left. Earth-sized, sun-sized, solar system-sized, and then we used a 10 light-year diameter sphere. So those elements, we opted for this kind of hand-drawn look, sketch look to it, in order to create something that could coexist with the photorealistic astrophysical simulations, so that this was going to have a distinct look. You would know that this is not existing in the same space as the objects that we're talking about. So then, this is an example of how we use that. This is the first event that we visit in the show, which is the collapse of a core collapse supernova. And here we're seeing a model from a group at the Flatiron Institute of a supergiant, and it is, as you can see, in the scale, it's about the size of the inner solar system. So we're using this to convey scale, and that those scale graphics are introduced and then come up at different points during the show. This core collapse supernova is actually one of the more complex sequences in the show, because it actually has essentially 4 nested astrophysical simulations. In it, you have this supernova, you have the supergiant. They then come into shell burning simulation, and this is actually one of, I think, the most one of the reasons I'm glad that we did real visualization of simulations, because it's not what you would see drawn in a textbook. If you were just to draw the cartoon of this, you'd draw the onion structure that we see in textbooks all the time. But the simulation of the shell burning that occurs right before the core collapse is this dramatic, crazy, turbulent environment. And this is a simulation from Carl Fields, who at the time was at Los Alamos National Labs. The different colors represent different elements. You'll see it in the show tonight. I don't need to go into great detail. Then we come into the center of that, and it's kind of obscured here, but in the very center of this is the slightly larger than San Francisco-sized neutron star before the core, before it actually collapses. Once it collapses, then you have, again, this very turbulent region around it. This is why supernovae don't explode in 1D simulations, because you actually need to track this 3-dimensional turbulence to have the sort of neutrino pressure to cause the supernova to explode. And the way you achieve this as a simulation is you use what's called adaptive mesh refinement to make manageable calculation. And that is great if you're doing calculations to publish a paper. It's a lot harder if you want to create an animation from it. I can talk about this at one level. Actually, Stuart Levy's in the room. He can talk about it at a totally different level. But basically what you have to do is use these nested simulations. These are going from the lowest resolution to the highest resolution data. And what you'll see is you start to see these blocky artifacts. That's the intersection of 2 volumes in the adaptive mesh refinement sim. So basically what you do is, if you've got a lot of action happening in one volume, so you take your cube and you break it into 8, and then one of those cubes might have a lot going on in it, so you break that one up into 8 cubes, and so on and so forth. So you may have several orders of magnitude in scale represented by different scales of the simulation. You then have to reassemble this jigsaw when you create these rendered frames. So just stepping through the different resolutions. This is the smallest scale but highest resolution part of the simulation, and then we can piece that all together. So this is then all playing back in much slower than real time. We've slowed down time to be able to watch this expansion right before the supernova really explodes. So that's the kind of the one shot, probably the hero shot of the show in terms of simulations. We then see the formation of what is essentially Cassiopeia A. This is a 3D model that is a supercomputer simulation of Cassiopeia A, of that type of explosion. And we selected it because it resembles Cass A. The scientist who provided this, Salvatore Orlando, then provided the radiation calculations to give us emission in X-rays. And kind of Easter egg in the show, when we show the X-ray for the supernova remnant, we also show an X-ray background, which is tuned to look like the Chandra emission representation. So very briefly, I showed this in the dome the other night. This is our Type 1A explosion. What I like about this is, and you can see it pretty well here, better on my screen, is that we showed a double degenerate supernova. So we have two white dwarfs, one of which explodes as mass gets transferred onto it. And so what you see at the top of this is sort of the shadow of the other white dwarf, because when the white dwarf that explodes releases material, it's basically kind of shielded by the white dwarf companion. What's cool about this too is if you watch this in the show, we don't really call it out, but you can see the brightening of the simulation over time and the characteristic sort of Type 1A brightening and dimming, because you're having a whole cascade of events happening after the actual explosion, as you're converting elements from basically iron into nickel. Then I wanted to mention too, this is our colliding neutron stars. What's kind of cool about these is that we are actually showing the gravitational lensing from the neutron stars. And just to kind of illustrate what this means, if you have no lensing, here we just put a nice grid on our neutron stars to show you're seeing them looking like spheres. But the same camera, but with lensing, what you actually do is you end up magnifying the stars. You're actually seeing around the limb of the star, and so they expand in terms of the visual space, but you're also seeing a very different geometry. This is actually relevant for exploration neutron stars, which is kind of cool, but we're enjoying showing that in the show. And then just quickly, I'll mention that we worked with Ilumbra on the beautiful Cat's Eye nebula representation they do. Fantastic work disentangling 2D images into 3D models. I'll just note that we updated a data set of planetary nebula Type 1A, Type 2 supernovae that we're happy to share. It's a little difficult to disentangle Type 2 supernova from Type 1A, but we did our best job with that. So it's one that I think it's the only data set I've seen that tries to distinguish between the two. I'm racing through this a little faster than I'd hoped, but the final shot of the show, as I mentioned in the dome last night, is one that I didn't want to do because it's so complicated, but but our advisors were quite keen on showing the evolution of the galaxy over time. So the idea was really to underscore where elements came from that would eventually form the sun. And so what we're seeing here is the galaxy that looked about 7 billion years ago. Those lines represent the track of material that eventually would flow in to become part of the solar system based on the cosmological simulation we used. So the upshot of this is that atoms inside each of us may have origins, inside one molecule may have origins hundreds of thousands of light years or even millions of light years apart. So we are bigger than the galaxy in that sense. So again, showing tonight, Spark, Universe and Us at 8 p.m. right before NIA, so I hope you can join us in the dome for that. Thank you.
All right, unfortunately we don't have any time for questions, so you will have to find Ryan elsewhere in the conference, but we are going to quickly switch over to our next presentation. All right, so our next presentation is Colin. Screwed up the first name. This is Colin Hochstetler, and talking about classical to synthesized, the space race, and changing musical aesthetics in the planetarium. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I'm a music researcher, and I've been doing research on music and planetariums for a little over 2 years now. I'm really excited to be here, and I'd love to hear your feedback after this. So today, in the United States and around the world, as we know, licensed planetarium productions are designed with state-of-the-art visuals and are accompanied by a wide variety of music. One has to travel to merely a few planetariums to learn that each location does something very unique with their musical choices. Planetariums big and small each have site-specific techniques for putting on programs, with some making their own high-tech shows, some presenting high-tech shows made by others, some making homespun programs, and etc. And this led me to want to research the history of the music that we know in our planetariums today. because the research I've conducted in the archives of planetariums in the Midwest and beyond has led me to believe that the musical variety that we know in our programs today was not always there. So today in planetarium productions we have, you know, popular music, classical music, synthesized music, rock, all sorts of stuff. But I don't think this was always the case. And so what I want to do in this presentation is not tell you what type of music we should play in our productions. That's not my job. Rather, I just want to outline the historical trends so that we might think deeply about how and why we use music in our programs. And so that we can highlight the effectiveness of combining visuals and music in communicating space science in these spaces of ours. So, planetarium programs today have all kinds of music, like I said. And some of them make their own specially composed new music for programs. In some cases, all of these musical styles are mixed together over the course of a single show. Especially in professionally produced productions and licensed shows, music is often accompanying visuals and narrative constantly. It's very rare that you'll hear a moment without a musical background. But this was not always standard practice. Before the planetarium show that we know today was the planetarium lecture, a difference which proved to be consequential for the music heard under the dome. In the period between 1930 and 1958, beginning with the opening of the Adler Planetarium in Chicago and ending with the American public's acceptance of the Moog synthesizer as a valid musical instrument, music from the Western classical tradition was, at least based on what I have found in my archival research, the only music one would hear in planetarium productions. Music by figures such as Rachmaninoff, Richard Wagner, Richard Strauss, Gustav Holst with his planets, of course, Debussy, and other widely known great composers were commonplace in planetariums. Planetarians across the country noticed that these compositions were appropriate for this planetarium, and classical compositions, which were disseminated in American popular media culture, were often understood as high class and educated, or worthy of study. And based on who was typically in planetariums at the time in the first half of the 20th century, you can imagine why this might be the case. So thus, American planetariums, being spaces for education, for lectures, and for appreciation of the stars, would only have classical music accompanying their programs for the better part of 40 years. But this is only part of the story. At major institutions like the Adler and Griffith planetariums, archival documents show that music was really not played all that often during a lecture in the early years. As you can see in this archival document here, music only plays for 2.5 minutes before and after the demonstration or lecture. And from what I can tell, it's not playing during it. It might have been used occasionally at the start or end, but often in documentation, the music was not named. Planetarians were focused on education, and when it comes to archiving documentation, they weren't really paying much attention to what music they were using or keeping track of it. And in this time, the spectacle of the projection machine was really seen as entertaining enough, which is why I think that music wasn't used all that often. But this all started to change during the space race, with the launch of Soviet Union's Sputnik satellite in 1957. Shortly after Sputnik stirred up America's technological superiority, planetarium directors started emphasizing the entertaining value of their spaces in order to draw in larger crowds. In 1958, in a symposium titled Planetaria and Their Use for Education, planetarium directors, educators, and enthusiasts gathered to discuss the future of the profession. Representatives from every existing US planetarium was invited to attend, and in the documented talks of the symposium, there was a sense that this new space age would transform the role of the planetarium in society. And as I'm going to show, indeed it did transform. It was at this symposium that music was first documented as being viewed as a serious tool for planetariums to utilize. Many speakers emphasized that in order to meet this new educational need for adults who were trying to catch up with the space age, entertaining, or what they called dramatic elements, needed to be engaged with. Significantly, there were calls for a more focused use of music, with planetarians noting how classical music, specifically classical music, could be used more often and with more dramatic intent. When specific compositions were paired with particular kinds of demonstrations, such as Wagner's Liebestod with the sunrise sequence, some directors believed that American youth and adults would be more likely to engage with the message of the program, and consequently, they would desire to pursue space sciences as a career. What we see in 1958 as well is the start of what I call then the cinematification of the planetarium experience. Suddenly, due to the launch of Sputnik, planetarians began making their programs resemble Hollywood films, meaning that special effects and recordings of classical music were used to add emotional impact to a narrated lecture. And as the archives at the Adler show, in the years following 1958, classical music was more efficiently documented and printed music lists were incorporated into the archives, and music was incorporated into programs at a higher volume than in previous years. As you can see, this is a document from 1968 in which all classical compositions are matched with specific demonstrations during a lecture. And important for us at the Great Lakes Planetarium Association, a driving figure in this shift to emphasize entertainment was a person named Dan Snow, who was then planetarium director at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. At the symposium in 1958, he personally pushed for the idea that, quote, some programs or parts of programs are made more effective if the speaker talks above a musical background, end quote. And he was also a proponent of using solely classical music. And even more important for our community, Dan Snow went on to be a founding member of the GLPA and attended its first gathering in Cincinnati in 1966. The Adler, where I've done most of my archival research, and it's cool that a lot of Adler people are here right now, naturally came to be involved with our association, and so figures within the GLPA, I believe, were a driving force in the cinematification of the planetarium experience in the United States, and are therefore at least partly responsible for the planetarium experience we know and love today. But as I alluded to earlier, this sole use of classical music is not the end of the story. Things began to change in 1968 when the groundbreaking electronic composer Wendy Carlos released Switched on Bach, an album of various Bach pieces recorded with the Moog synthesizer. After this album's release, synthesized music transitioned from being an obscure and unapproved music by the American public to being listened to by people everywhere. And its popularity, as well as the otherworldly sounds that the synthesizer made, brought the instrument into planetarium productions. Archival evidence at the Adler shows that orchestral classical music in 1969 started to be joined with synthesized classical music. And of course, we are all familiar, well, I'm assuming most of us are familiar with Geodesium. He does planetarium music, and he started making his music in the early 1970s, shortly after the Moog found its way into more planetarium productions. And by the 1980s, classical music had pretty much disappeared as synthesized popular tunes and ambient space music became the norm in programs. So in a period of less than 3 decades, music in programs went from being comprised of classical music only to hardly ever being used, to being space music and all sorts of different kinds of synthesized sounds being present in all parts of a program. So to conclude, there was a musical revolution in planetariums between 1957 and the mid-1980s. Shifting cultural perspectives and new technologies forever changed the music people heard in programs, and leading figures in the GLPA kind of helped facilitate this change. And as we all know, there was another digital revolution in the mid-2000s that kind of changed the nature of our planetarium spaces. And now, as shows are being professionally produced and licensed and distributed all over the place, there's a really large diversity of music that is being used in programs, and there's really no right or way wrong to do it. And so I think this change is really wonderful and fantastic. It's been great to explore, and I'd really encourage everyone, as you're presenting in your planetariums or showing programs to the public, to really think about what the music is doing to communicate the science that the show is intending to teach people. So unfortunately, I cannot stick around for the rest of the conference. I have to drive to Detroit in like 30 minutes. But I would really love for anyone to reach out to me, ask questions. I would really like to work with more planetariums. I've done archival research at a couple of planetariums, but if you know that your space has an archive, please reach out to me. I would love to work with you and hopefully contribute to this conversation some more in the future. Thanks.
Two questions if I can throw out. One more technical based on stories of my first boss. Was there a big influence of the fact that commercial recording tape technology did not exist until the late 50s, 1960s on the music being played? Number two, in your research, did you come across the vortex experiments from Morrison Planetarium in the mid-1950s, which were the first musique concrète in a planetarium environment, and also had a big influence then on Hart's from space and all other synthesized music?
Okay, thank you. No, I'll start with your second one. I haven't heard of that, so thank you so much for bringing that up. I'm going to come talk to you in a little bit. And then in terms of recording technology, yeah, so there are some archival documents about recording tech. A lot of planetariums in the 1930s and 40s, I'm not really sure what they were necessarily doing. I don't know if they had like a record player in the middle of the space because they just didn't document what they did. But I have to assume before speakers and all of the high-tech stuff came into fruition that music might, yeah, I think it's a number of reasons. The technology wasn't quite there yet, but also there was that sense of that this is an educated space and we don't want anything detracting from the educational message. Thank you.
I have a quick question for the uninitiated. Do you have any resources to help understand what kind of music helps what message?
Well, so that is really dependent on everyone's personal preferences. There are plenty of opinions from the 50s and 60s and 70s of people saying, use this type of music for this effect, or use WC if you're trying to create an eerie atmosphere of like going to another world. But anymore, it really depends on everyone's personal preferences. Planetarium audiences are a lot more diverse now, and people from all over the place are coming into our spaces, so there's no one type of music that is going to communicate a type of message. It really depends on your individual taste or what you think a piece of music might be conveying.
Hi.
Yeah.
So sorry, because I was taking pictures, I had to run out of the room and I may have missed this. Are you only doing research for planetarium in the United States, or would you be interested in more information from the birthplace of planetariums, Germany?
Yeah, so going to Germany to do archival research has been on my list ever since I started this. I have talked to the Zeiss people that are here and gotten in contact with the Zeiss archives, and hopefully in the next couple of years I can go. But yes, I would love more information about other sources in Germany as well.
Come find me, we'll exchange
Okay.
information. And yeah, UIUC School of Music.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is an ongoing project. I don't claim to know everything, but this is just kind of like the trends that I've seen as I've been going. So thank you.